The dust settled around his worn boots as he stepped into the general store, and Theresa Novak looked up from counting inventory to see the most weathered, broke-looking man she had ever laid eyes on. It was 1883 in Hot Springs, South Dakota, and the town had seen its share of drifters passing through on their way to somewhere better, but this one caught her attention for reasons she could not quite explain. His clothes were patched in multiple places, his hat had seen better years, and the way he carried himself spoke of someone who owned nothing but the horse tied outside. Yet there was something in his eyes, a quiet determination that made her pause mid-count. "Help you with something?" Theresa asked, brushing a strand of dark hair from her forehead. At 22, she had been running this store since her father passed 2 years ago, and she prided herself on reading people quickly. This man was dangerous in a different way than the usual troublemakers. He was dangerous because he looked at her like she was the first real thing he had seen in months. "Just need some supplies, madam. Whatever I can get for this." He placed a small leather pouch on the counter, and when Theresa opened it, she found maybe enough for a pound of coffee and some jerky. "That will not get you much," she said, trying to keep her voice neutral. Her late father had taught her never to judge a man by his pocketbook, but she also knew better than to give away merchandise. The store was barely keeping afloat as it was. "I know," he said simply. "But it is all I have right now." Theresa studied him more carefully. He was probably in his mid-20s, with sun-darkened skin and hands that showed years of hard work. There was no deception in his face, no attempt to charm or manipulate. He was simply stating a fact. "You looking for work?" She asked, surprising herself. "Always," he replied. "Name is Arthur Fletcher. I can do just about anything that needs doing. Theresa Novak, I own this place." She gestured around the store, which was cluttered with goods but showed signs of neglect in the corners where heavy lifting was required. "My stockroom needs organizing. Shipment came in last week, and I have not had time to deal with it properly. You do that, and I will give you supplies and a hot meal." Arthur's face brightened just slightly, enough that Theresa noticed. "That is more than fair, Miss Novak. Just point me in the right direction." She led him through the back door to the stockroom, which was indeed a disaster. Crates were stacked haphazardly, some opened and rifled through, others still sealed. Sacks of flour and grain leaned against the walls, and the whole space needed a thorough reorganization. "Everything needs to be sorted by type and stacked properly," Theresa explained. "The heavier items on the bottom, lighter on top. I need to be able to find things quickly when customers ask." Arthur nodded, already rolling up his sleeves. "I will have it done before sundown." Theresa left him to work and returned to the front of the store, but she found herself distracted throughout the afternoon. She kept thinking about the quiet confidence in his voice, the way he had not tried to negotiate or make excuses. Most drifters who came through had elaborate stories about fortunes lost or opportunities just around the corner. Arthur Fletcher had simply told the truth. Several customers came and went, including Martha Reynolds, the banker's wife, who loved to gossip. "I saw a raggedy man go into your stockroom, Theresa. You should be careful about who you let in there." "He is helping me organize," Theresa said curtly. She had never liked Martha's superior tone. "A drifter, I assume. They are all the same, dear. They will take what they can and disappear in the night." After Martha left, Theresa found herself annoyed at the woman's presumption, but also worried. What did she really know about Arthur Fletcher? Only what he had told her, and that amounted to very little. She decided to check on him and walked back to the stockroom. What she found surprised her. The space was transformed. Every crate was neatly stacked, labeled with chalk marks on the side indicating contents. The sacks were arranged by weight and type, and Arthur had even swept the floor, which Theresa had not asked him to do. He was working on the last corner, moving with efficient, practiced movements. "This is remarkable," she said honestly. "You have a talent for this." Arthur straightened up, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Just common sense, madam. Everything in its right place makes life easier." "Most men I know would not see it that way," Theresa said. "They think organization is woman's work." "Then most men you know are fools," Arthur replied simply. "Good organization saves time, and time is the one thing we can never get back." Theresa found herself smiling. "You have an unusual way of thinking, Mr. Fletcher. Just Arthur, please. And I've had a lot of time to think while riding from place to place. Where are you from originally?" Theresa asked, leaning against the door frame. She told herself she was just being friendly, but the truth was she wanted to know more about this man. "Illinois, originally. Grew up on a farm until the bank took it when I was 18. Been moving ever since, picking up work where I can find it." There was no bitterness in his voice, just acceptance. "And you never settled anywhere?" "Never found a reason to," Arthur said, looking directly at her, "until maybe now." The intensity of his gaze made Theresa's heart skip, and she quickly looked away. "I should get your meal ready." "You have certainly earned it." She hurried back to the front, feeling her cheeks flush. This was ridiculous. She had known the man for all of 4 hours, and here she was reacting like a schoolgirl. Theresa prided herself on being practical and level-headed. The store demanded it. She could not afford romantic nonsense. But as she prepared a plate of stew and fresh bread in the small kitchen attached to the store, she could not stop thinking about what Arthur had said. Until maybe now. Did he mean hot springs, or did he mean her? And why did she care so much about the answer? Arthur finished the stockroom and came to the front just as the sun was beginning to set. Theresa handed him the plate and watched as he ate with the careful attention of someone who had not had a good meal in a while. He did not rush, but he did not waste a single bite either. "This is excellent," he said. "Thank you." "You earned it 3 times over," Theresa replied. "That stockroom would have taken me a week to sort out properly." "Happy to help." Arthur set down the empty plate. "If you ever need more work done, I am staying at the boarding house on 3rd Street. At least for a few more days until my money runs out." "Actually," Theresa said, making a decision that surprised her, "I could use regular help. The store is too much for one person, especially with deliveries and maintenance. It would not pay much, but it would be steady." Arthur's expression shifted, and for the first time, Theresa saw real hope in his face. "You mean that?" "I do not say things I do not mean," Theresa said firmly. "But I need to be clear. This is a respectable establishment. I cannot have any trouble." "You will not get any from me," Arthur promised. "I just want honest work and a chance to build something stable. Then we have an arrangement. Come by tomorrow morning at 7 and we will discuss wages and hours." After Arthur left with his supplies, Theresa closed up the store and climbed the stairs to her small apartment above. The living space was modest but comfortable, filled with furniture her father had made. She sat by the window, looking out at the darkening street, and wondered what she had just set in motion. The next morning, Arthur arrived precisely at 7, looking cleaner and more rested than the day before. He had clearly visited the bathhouse and made an effort to mend his clothes. The patches were still visible, but everything was neat and tidy. "Morning, Miss Novak," he said, removing his hat. "Theresa is fine when we are working," she replied. "And good morning to you, too." They spent the next few hours going over the store's operations. Theresa was surprised by how quickly Arthur picked up on the inventory system and the pricing structure. He asked intelligent questions and made suggestions that showed he understood business better than his appearance suggested. "You have done this before," Theresa observed. My father ran a feed and grain, Arthur admitted. Before we lost everything, I grew up working inventory and talking to customers. What happened? Theresa asked gently. Arthur's jaw tightened slightly. Bad harvest 2 years in a row and the bank would not extend credit. We tried everything, but in the end, it did not matter. They took the farm, took the business, took everything. My parents moved in with my uncle in Ohio. I tried to make it work there, but there were too many mouths to feed already, so I left to find my own way. That must have been hard, Theresa said. It taught me what matters, Arthur replied. Not the things you own, but what you are willing to work for, what you are willing to build. Throughout the day, customers came in and out, and Theresa watched how Arthur interacted with them. He was polite but not overly familiar, efficient without being rushed. Old Mrs. Patterson, who was notoriously particular, actually smiled when Arthur helped her find the right weight of yarn for her knitting project. By closing time, Theresa knew she had made the right decision. Arthur was exactly what the store needed. But there was another feeling growing inside her, one that had nothing to do with business efficiency and everything to do with the way her heart jumped when he smiled. Over the next few weeks, a comfortable routine developed. Arthur proved to be invaluable, handling the heavy lifting and making improvements that Theresa had not even thought of. He built better shelving for the dry goods, repaired the front step that had been wobbly for months, and even negotiated a better deal with the freight company on deliveries. You have a knack for this, Theresa told him one afternoon as they took inventory together. I like building things, Arthur said, making things better than they were. It feels like progress. Most people would just do what they were told and collect their wages, Theresa observed. Arthur looked at her seriously. I am not most people, and this is not just a job to me. What is it then? Theresa asked, her voice softer. A chance, Arthur said simply. Maybe the first real chance I have had in 5 years. The townspeople began to notice Arthur's presence, and as always in small communities, opinions formed quickly. Martha Reynolds continued to sniff disapprovingly whenever she came into the store, making pointed comments about propriety and reputation. But others, like Doc Harrison and Sheriff McCready, seemed to approve. That fellow you hired is a good worker, Doc Harrison told Theresa one day. Fixed my office door last week when he saw it was sticking. Would not take payment either. That sounds like Arthur, Theresa said, feeling a warm pride that she tried to suppress. But it was harder to suppress the growing feelings she had whenever Arthur was near. She noticed everything about him now, the way his hands moved with such careful precision, the small smile that appeared when he accomplished something difficult, the kindness in his voice when dealing with children who came into the store. He was everything she had not known she was looking for. One evening after closing, Arthur was repairing a section of the floor that had started to sag. Theresa brought him coffee and sat on the counter, watching him work. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course," Arthur replied, not looking up from his work. "Why did you stay here?" "In Hot Springs, I mean. You said you have been drifting for years. What made you stop?" Arthur set down his hammer and met her eyes. "Honestly, always. You," he said quietly. "The way you looked at me that first day. Not with pity or judgment, but like you were willing to see who I actually was. That had not happened in a long time." Theresa's breath caught. "Arthur, I know I have no right," he continued quickly. "You are a respectable business owner, and I am just a broke drifter trying to get back on his feet. But I want you to know that every day I come here, every improvement I make, it is because I am trying to prove something." "Prove what?" Theresa whispered. "That I am worth taking a chance on. That I can be the kind of man who deserves someone like you." The vulnerability in his voice nearly broke her heart. "You do not have to prove anything to me." "Yes, I do," Arthur said firmly, because I have nothing to offer you except work and promises. But I want you to know the promises are real. If you give me time, I will build something worth having, a life worth sharing. Theresa climbed down from the counter and walked over to him. Arthur Fletcher, I have watched you for weeks now. You think I do not see how hard you work, how you help people without expecting anything in return, how you have made this store better in a month than I did in 2 years. That is just work, Arthur protested. No, Theresa said, reaching out to touch his hand. That is character, and character is worth more than money or property. My father taught me that. Arthur's hand turned to grasp hers. I want to court you properly, Theresa. Do things right. But I need you to understand what you would be getting. I have $23 saved. I own 1 horse, 1 saddle, and the clothes you see me in. That is the complete sum of my worldly possessions. And I have a struggling store and an apartment full of memories, Theresa replied. We are both starting from difficult places, but maybe that is exactly why we understand each other. So you are saying yes? Arthur asked, hope lighting his face. I am saying I want to see where this goes, Theresa said carefully, but we should be smart about it. This town talks and my reputation affects the business. Then we will do everything proper, Arthur promised. Walks in public places, Sunday dinners if you will have me, all of it above board. I would like that, Theresa said, smiling. Their first official outing was a Sunday picnic by Fall River, which ran through the edge of town. Arthur borrowed a basket from his landlady and filled it with food from the store, insisting on paying for every item. Theresa brought a blanket and her mother's recipe for apple pie. The day was warm but not hot, perfect spring weather in South Dakota. They found a spot under a cottonwood tree with a view of the water. As they ate, they talked about everything and nothing. Arthur told her about growing up on the farm, about his childhood dreams of being an engineer and building bridges. Why did you not pursue that? Theresa asked. Money, Arthur said simply. Engineering school costs money we did not have. Then the farm went under and surviving became more important than dreaming. It is not too late, Theresa said. You are only 25. People start new careers all the time. Maybe, Arthur said, but she could hear the doubt in his voice. Right now, I am more concerned with building a stable life. Dreams can wait. Dreams and stability do not have to be separate things, Theresa argued. You are one of the most naturally talented problem solvers I have ever met. The way you redesigned the storage system in the stockroom, or how you figured out the roof leak just by looking at water stains, that is engineering. Arthur looked at her with such intensity that Theresa felt her cheeks flush. You really see all that? I see you, Theresa said. The real you, not the broke drifter everyone else wants to focus on. That means more than you know, Arthur said quietly. As the afternoon wore on, they fell into easier conversation. Theresa talked about her father and how much she missed his guidance. About the pressure of keeping the store running when she sometimes felt overwhelmed. About her own dreams of maybe expanding someday, bringing in more specialty goods that the other stores in town did not carry. You could do that, Arthur said. The store has good bones. It just needs capital and planning, both of which are in short supply, Theresa said ruefully. Not as much as you think, Arthur replied. I have been looking at your books with your permission. You have steady customers and good margins. With some careful saving and maybe one good season, you could afford to expand. You have been thinking about this? Theresa asked, surprised. I think about your business a lot, Arthur admitted. Because I want it to succeed, I want you to have everything you are working toward. The sincerity in his voice made Theresa's heart swell. You are unlike any man I have ever known. Is that good or bad? Arthur asked with a small smile. Very good, Theresa said softly. As summer settled over Hot Springs, Arthur and Theresa's courtship became the subject of much town discussion. Some, like Martha Reynolds, disapproved openly. Others were more supportive. Sheriff McCready went out of his way to tell Theresa he thought Arthur was a solid young man. "I did some checking," the sheriff said casually one day when he stopped in for tobacco. "Asked around about Arthur Fletcher. Everything he told you about his background checks out. His family did lose their farm in Illinois. People there speak well of him. You investigated him." Theresa asked, not sure whether to be grateful or annoyed. "It is my job to look out for people," McCready said. "And you are a young woman alone running a business. I wanted to make sure this fellow was who he claimed to be." "And," Theresa prompted, "and he is exactly what he appears. A hard-working young man who got dealt a bad hand and is trying to build something better. You could do a lot worse." Despite the approval of people she respected, Theresa could not shake the worried comments from others. Martha Reynolds was particularly persistent, stopping Theresa on the street one Saturday afternoon. "You know what people are saying," Martha said, her voice dripping with false concern. "That you are foolish to tie yourself to a penniless drifter. That he is probably using you to establish himself before moving on to someone with better prospects." "I do not care what people say," Theresa replied coldly. "You should care about your reputation," Martha insisted. "That store is all you have. You risk everything by associating with someone so far beneath your station." "Arthur is beneath no one's station," Theresa said, her voice rising. "He works harder than most men in this town and asks for nothing he has not earned. If you have nothing kind to say, Mrs. Reynolds, I would appreciate you keeping your opinions to yourself." She walked away before Martha could respond, but the encounter left her shaken. Not because she doubted Arthur, but because she knew how much power gossip held in a small town. If enough people decided she was making a mistake, it could affect the store. People might take their business elsewhere out of disapproval. That evening, she confided her worries to Arthur as they sat on the steps of the store after closing. The summer night was warm and fireflies danced in the growing darkness. "Maybe we should slow down," she said quietly. "Give people time to adjust to the idea." Arthur was silent for a long moment. "Is that what you want?" "No," Theresa admitted, "but I have to think practically. The store is everything I have. If I lose it because people disapprove of us, then they are fools," Arthur said firmly. "But I understand your worry. I never want to be the reason you lose something important." "You are not the reason," Theresa said. "Small-minded gossip is the reason." "Same result, though," Arthur replied. "Look, Theresa, I told you from the beginning that I want to build something worth having. That takes time. If we need to be more discreet about courting, I can live with that. What I cannot live with is being the cause of you losing your business." "I hate that we have to hide," Theresa said. "We are not hiding," Arthur corrected gently. "We are being smart. There is a difference, and while we are being smart, I am going to work on changing people's minds." "How?" Theresa asked. Arthur smiled slightly. "By proving them wrong. By showing this town that I am not a drifter anymore. I am someone who builds, who stays, who contributes." Over the next few months, Arthur did exactly that. He involved himself in community projects, volunteering to help repair the church roof and working alongside other men to build a new schoolhouse. He was always respectful, always helpful, and slowly, attitudes began to shift. Doc Harrison hired him to build an addition to his clinic. The work was careful and precise, and when it was finished, the doctor showed it off proudly to anyone who would look. "That Arthur Fletcher is a master carpenter," he told people. "Best work I have seen in years." Sheriff McCready asked Arthur to help design a better jail cell that would be more secure but more humane. Arthur's solution was clever and effective, earning him more respect from the townspeople. Even Martha Reynolds had to grudgingly admit that Arthur seemed to be making something of himself when he fixed her garden gate without being asked, refusing any payment. But Arthur was not content with just winning over the town. He had a bigger plan, one he had been working on since that first conversation with Theresa about building a life together. He saved every penny he could, living as frugally as possible, and he started looking at land. There was a property on the outskirts of town that had been sitting empty for 2 years. It was 5 acres with a small stream running through it and a decent stand of trees. The land was affordable because it needed work. The previous owner had started building a house but never finished before moving on. The foundation was there, and some of the framing, but everything else was abandoned to the elements. Arthur spent his Sundays walking that property, imagining what it could be. He drew up plans in the evenings, calculating costs and materials. It would take time and a lot of work, but it was possible. He could build a house there, a real home. And if he did, maybe he would finally have something solid to offer Theresa. By autumn, Arthur had saved enough for a down payment on the land. He went to the bank, prepared for rejection, but the loan officer surprised him. "I have been watching you, Mr. Fletcher," the banker said. "You are a hard worker and you have proven yourself in this community. The land you want is not worth much as it sits, but I can see potential. I will give you the loan on one condition." "What condition?" Arthur asked warily. "That you do what you have done with Miss Novak's store and with every other project you have touched. That you build something solid and lasting. We need more men like you in Hot Springs. Men who build rather than tear down." Arthur left the bank that afternoon as a landowner, and the feeling was overwhelming. It was not much a piece of rough ground and an unfinished foundation, but it was his. And it was the first step toward the future he wanted. He did not tell Theresa immediately. He wanted to make real progress first, to show her something concrete rather than just another promise. So he began spending his Sundays and every free moment working on the property. The work was backbreaking. He salvaged what he could of the old framing, replaced what was damaged, and slowly started to build walls. Theresa noticed that Arthur was gone more on Sundays, but did not press him about it. She assumed he was taking on extra work to save money, which was true in a sense. She was dealing with her own challenges, trying to expand the store's inventory as they had discussed. Arthur's improvements and business sense had increased profits, and she finally had enough to take a chance on some specialty items. The first snow fell in late November, and Arthur knew he had to work faster. He wanted to get the house weather-tight before winter set in for real. He hired 2 other men to help, paying them from his savings, and together they pushed hard to get the roof on and the windows installed. By December, the house was enclosed. It was rough and unfinished inside, but it was structurally sound. Arthur stood in what would be the main room, looking around at his work. It was small by some standards, just 4 rooms total, but it was solid. Every board was set true, every joint tight. This was not just a house. It was a statement, a promise made real. On Christmas Eve, Arthur finally told Theresa he had something to show her. They rode out to the property together in a borrowed wagon, and Theresa's eyes widened when she saw the house. "What is this?" she asked. "Ours," Arthur said simply. "If you will have it, have me." Theresa climbed down from the wagon, walking toward the house as if in a dream. Arthur followed, opening the door for her. Inside, the space was empty but filled with possibility. Afternoon light streamed through the windows, illuminating the clean wood and careful construction. "You built this?" Theresa whispered. "Every board," Arthur confirmed. "It is not finished inside yet. It needs a floor and plaster walls and furniture and 100 other things. But the bones are solid. I made sure of that." Theresa turned to face him, and Arthur saw tears in her eyes. "Why?" "Because you said I did not have to prove anything, but I needed to prove it to myself," Arthur said. "You told me I was worth taking a chance on, but I needed to believe it, to know that I could build something real and lasting. This house is my answer to everyone who said I was just a broke drifter, to every doubt I had about myself. This is proof that I can be the man you deserve." "Arthur," Theresa said, her voice breaking, "I never needed this." "I know," Arthur replied, "but I did, and now it is done. So I am asking you properly. Theresa Novak, will you marry me? Will you help me finish this house and build a life in it together?" Theresa did not answer with words. She closed the distance between them and kissed him, and Arthur felt every doubt and fear from the past 5 years melt away. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "Yes," Theresa said. "Yes to all of it." They were married in February 1884 in a simple ceremony at the church. Most of the town attended, including Martha Reynolds, who had softened considerably after seeing the house Arthur built. "I misjudged that young man," she admitted to anyone who would listen. "He is a credit to this community." The wedding was modest but joyful. Theresa wore her mother's dress, altered to fit her. Arthur wore a new suit he had saved for months to buy. Doc Harrison stood up for Arthur, and the sheriff's wife stood up for Theresa. The whole event felt right, like the natural conclusion to a journey that had started the day Arthur walked into the general store. After the ceremony, they held a reception at the house. It was still unfinished, but Arthur had made the main room presentable. Friends and neighbors brought food and well wishes. Someone brought a fiddle, and there was dancing on the rough floorboards. As Theresa danced with her new husband, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. How she had almost listened to the doubters, almost let fear keep her from this happiness. How Arthur had taken his own doubts and transformed them into something solid and beautiful. "What are you thinking?" Arthur asked, spinning her carefully. "That I am the luckiest woman alive," Theresa replied. "I think I am the lucky one," Arthur countered. "You believed in me when I barely believed in myself." "We believed in each other," Theresa said. "That is what matters." Over the next months, they worked together to finish the house. Theresa kept running the store, but Arthur was now her full partner in that as well. They split their time between the business and their home, and slowly, the house transformed from a rough structure into a real home. Arthur built furniture in the evenings, a table and chairs for the kitchen, a bed frame for their bedroom, shelves for books and dishes. Theresa sewed curtains and brought color and warmth to each room. They planted a garden in the spring, putting in vegetables and a few flowers. The house became known around town as a symbol of what was possible with hard work and determination. Arthur's carpentry skills were in high demand, and he took on projects that paid well enough to allow them to save money. But he never lost sight of what mattered most: his partnership with Theresa and the life they were building together. By their first anniversary, Theresa had news that filled them both with excitement and trepidation. She was expecting a baby. Arthur was thrilled but immediately worried about everything that could go wrong. He read every book Doc Harrison had on pregnancy and childbirth, asking questions until the doctor laughed. "Your wife is healthy and strong," Doc assured him. "Women have been having babies for thousands of years. She will be fine." Still, Arthur fussed over Theresa constantly. He would not let her lift anything heavy at the store and insisted she rest more. Theresa found it equal parts annoying and endearing. "I am pregnant, not an invalid," she told him one day when he tried to stop her from restocking shelves. "I know, but I worry," Arthur admitted. You are the most important thing in my life. I cannot lose you. You will not lose me, Theresa said firmly. I am tough, remember. I ran a store by myself for 2 years before you came along. I know you are tough, Arthur said, but let me take care of you anyway. It makes me feel useful. Theresa softened at that. All right, but you have to promise not to drive me completely crazy with your worrying. I will try, Arthur said, but they both knew it was a promise he could not keep. Their son was born in October 1885, during the first cold snap of autumn. The labor was long and difficult, and Arthur wore a path in the floorboards of the waiting room at Doc Harrison's clinic. When he finally heard the baby cry, he nearly collapsed with relief. Doc Harrison emerged with a smile. You have a healthy boy, Arthur, and Theresa is tired but fine. You can go in now. Arthur entered the room to find Theresa propped up in bed, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked exhausted but radiant. Come meet your son, she said softly. Arthur approached cautiously, as if afraid he might break something. When he looked down at the baby's face, he felt his entire world shift. This tiny person was his son, his and Theresa's. A whole new life that depended on them completely. He is perfect, Arthur whispered. He is, Theresa agreed. What should we name him? They had discussed names endlessly but never settled on anything. Now, looking at his son, Arthur knew exactly what felt right. Samuel, he said. After my father, if that is all right with you. Samuel Fletcher, Theresa said, testing the name. I like it. Samuel it is. Bringing Samuel home to the house Arthur built was one of the most meaningful moments of his life. As he carried his son over the threshold, he thought about how far he had come. 2 years ago, he had been a broke drifter with nothing to his name. Now he had a home, a thriving business partnership, a wife he adored, and a son. It felt almost too good to be true. But it was true, and it was real, and Arthur never took a moment of it for granted. He woke each morning grateful for the life he had built, grateful for Theresa, who had seen past his circumstances to the man he could become, grateful for the chance Hot Springs had given him to prove himself. Fatherhood suited Arthur. He was patient and gentle with Samuel, involved in every aspect of his care. He built a cradle that rocked smoothly, designed a changing table at the perfect height, and spent hours just holding his son and marveling at this new life. Theresa watched her husband with their child and fell even more in love with him. Arthur was everything she had hoped for and more. He was a devoted husband, a loving father, and a true partner in every sense of the word. The store continued to thrive under their joint management. Theresa's eye for what customers wanted, combined with Arthur's organizational skills and business sense, made them formidable. They expanded the inventory carefully, bringing in specialty items that drew customers from neighboring towns. Within a year, they had to hire additional help to manage the increased business. As Samuel grew from baby to toddler, the house grew with him. Arthur built a small room off the main bedroom for their son, complete with a tiny bed and shelves for toys. He added a porch with a railing so Samuel could play safely outside. Each improvement was made with the same care and precision as the original structure. The property itself flourished under their attention. The garden expanded to include fruit trees and berry bushes. Arthur built a proper barn for their horses and a chicken coop that provided fresh eggs. What had been rough, empty land was now a thriving homestead. In 1887, Theresa became pregnant again. This time, Arthur was less panicked and more excited. He knew what to expect, and Doc Harrison assured him that Theresa's first successful pregnancy boded well for this one. Their daughter was born in early spring of 1888, arriving with far less drama than Samuel had. She was a tiny, delicate thing with dark hair like her mother and Arthur's blue eyes. "What about Elizabeth?" Theresa suggested as they looked at their daughter. "After my mother, Elizabeth Fletcher," Arthur said. "It is beautiful. She is beautiful. With 2 children, life became busier but also richer." Samuel, now 2.5, was fascinated by his baby sister. He wanted to help with everything, though his help was often more trouble than assistance. Arthur was endlessly patient with him, teaching him small tasks and praising his efforts. The house that had once seemed spacious now felt full in the best way. There were toys scattered around and children's laughter echoing off the walls. This was what Arthur had envisioned when he built the place, not just a structure, but a home filled with love and family. By 1889, the store had grown so successful that Arthur and Theresa made a bold decision. They would build a larger facility and move the business to a better location on Main Street. The project was ambitious, but Arthur's reputation as a builder made it possible. He designed the new store himself, incorporating everything he had learned about efficient retail space. The construction took most of the year, but when it was finished, the new store was impressive. 2 stories with large display windows, organized departments, and a small office upstairs where they could handle bookkeeping. It was a far cry from the cluttered space where they had started. The grand opening was a community event. People came from all over the county to see the new store, and the first week's sales exceeded their wildest projections. Arthur and Theresa celebrated quietly that night, after the children were asleep, sitting on their porch and looking out at the property they had built together. "You ever think about that first day?" Theresa asked. "When you walked into my old store with almost nothing to your name?" "All the time," Arthur admitted. "I think about how close I came to riding right past Hot Springs. I was heading to the Black Hills, convinced my luck would change there, but my horse needed water and I saw your store and something made me stop." "Fate," Theresa said. "Maybe," Arthur replied. "Or just good fortune. Either way, I am grateful for it every day." "Martha Reynolds told me last week that she always knew you would succeed," Theresa said with amusement, conveniently forgetting all her dire warnings about you being a worthless drifter. Arthur laughed. "People remember what they want to remember. It does not matter. We know the truth." "The truth being that you built all of this from nothing," Theresa said. "The house, the business, the life. You did exactly what you promised you would do." "We built it," Arthur corrected. "I could not have done any of this without you. You took a chance on me when no one else would. You believed in me. That belief made everything else possible." Theresa leaned her head on his shoulder. "We made a good team." "The best team," Arthur agreed. As their children grew, Arthur made sure to teach them the values that had brought him through hard times. He taught Samuel carpentry, letting the boy help with small projects and praising his efforts. He taught Elizabeth to read using the same books that had entertained him as a child. Both children learned early the importance of hard work, honesty, and treating people with respect. The house remained a gathering place for the community. Arthur and Theresa hosted dinners for friends, fundraisers for community projects, and holiday celebrations. The space that Arthur had built with his own hands became known as a place of warmth and welcome. In 1892, their 3rd child was born, another son they named James. With 3 children, the house needed another expansion, and Arthur was happy to oblige. He added 2 more bedrooms and expanded the kitchen. Each addition was built with the same care as the original structure, maintaining the integrity of his original design while adapting to their growing family's needs. By the mid-1890s, Arthur Fletcher was one of the most respected men in Hot Springs. His carpentry and design skills were sought after throughout the region. He had built homes, businesses, and public buildings all over the county. But he never forgot where he came from or what it felt like to have nothing. He made a point of hiring men who were down on their luck, giving them the same chance Theresa had given him. He taught them skills and paid fair wages, and more than a few went on to establish their own successful businesses. Arthur believed in paying forward the kindness he had received. The store continued to grow and prosper. By 1897, it was the largest retailer in the region, employing 15 people and serving customers from 3 counties. Theresa managed the business side with skill and confidence, while Arthur handled facilities and expansion planning. They were equal partners in every sense, and their success reflected their combined talents. Samuel, now 12, showed an aptitude for business and often helped in the store after school. Elizabeth, at 9, was showing artistic talent and loved to arrange window displays. James, at 5, was still young but already showed signs of inheriting his father's practical problem-solving skills. One evening, as Arthur and Theresa sat on their porch watching the sunset, she brought up something that had been on her mind. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "Staying here instead of moving on to find your fortune in the gold fields or somewhere more exciting?" Arthur considered the question seriously. "No, not for a single moment. I found something better than gold here. I found purpose, family, a place where I belong. That is worth more than any fortune. Even though you could have been wealthy beyond imagining," Theresa pressed. "I am wealthy," Arthur said firmly. "Maybe not in the way the world measures it, but in every way that matters. I have a wife I love, children who are healthy and happy, work that fulfills me, and a home I built with my own hands. What more could a man want?" "I love you," Theresa said simply. "I love you too," Arthur replied. "More than I ever thought possible. You gave me everything when you gave me a chance." As the century drew to a close, Arthur and Theresa reflected on how much had changed since that day in 1883, when a broke drifter walked into a struggling general store. They had built an empire of sorts, though not the kind measured in dollars alone. They had built a family, a business, a reputation, and most importantly, a life together that was rich in all the ways that mattered. The house Arthur built stood solid and strong, weathering storms and seasons. It had grown from a simple 4-room structure to a sprawling home that accommodated their family and welcomed countless guests. Every board and nail was placed with care, built to last not just years but generations. In 1900, as the new century dawned, Arthur and Theresa celebrated their 16th wedding anniversary. Their children were growing into fine young people. Samuel was nearly ready to go off to college to study business. Elizabeth was becoming a skilled artist whose drawings were gaining attention. James was thriving in school and already talking about becoming a builder like his father. At 42 and 40, Arthur and Theresa were in the prime of their lives. The store was more successful than ever, and Arthur's construction business kept him busy with projects throughout the region. But they made sure to always prioritize their family and their relationship. On their anniversary, Arthur took Theresa back to the spot by Fall River where they had their first picnic. They sat under the same cottonwood tree, now larger and more established, just like their love. "I have something for you," Arthur said, pulling out a small box. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a small pendant shaped like a house. Theresa gasped when she saw it. "It is beautiful," she breathed. "I had it made by the jeweler in Rapid City," Arthur explained. "The house is a replica of our home. I wanted you to have something that represents what we built together." Theresa's eyes filled with tears as Arthur fastened the necklace around her neck. "You are the most thoughtful man I have ever known." "You inspire me to be better," Arthur said simply. "Every day, you inspire me." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the river flow past just as it had 17 years ago when they were young and just beginning their journey together. So much had changed, yet the essential bond between them remained as strong as ever. "Do you remember what you told me that first day?" Theresa asked. "About having nothing but $23 and the clothes on your back." "I remember," Arthur said. "I remember thinking it was probably not the best way to impress a beautiful woman, but I had decided I would only tell you the truth. That honesty was what convinced me you were different," Theresa said. "Most men would have exaggerated their prospects or made promises they could not keep. You just told me the simple truth." "It was all I had to offer," Arthur replied. "It was everything," Theresa corrected, "because it showed me who you really were, and who you were is who I fell in love with." Arthur pulled her close, and they sat together as the afternoon faded to evening. They talked about their children and their dreams for the future, about possibly expanding the business again, or maybe stepping back to enjoy life more, about traveling to see the parts of the country Arthur had passed through as a drifter, but this time together, as a family. "I want to go back to Illinois," Arthur said suddenly. "To show my parents what became of me. I left there feeling like a failure, and I want them to see that I made something of myself." "Then we will go," Theresa said, "all of us together. It will be good for the children to meet their grandparents and to see where you came from." They made that trip the following summer, traveling by train to Illinois with all 3 children. Arthur's parents were aging but still healthy, living with Arthur's uncle just as they had been when he left. The reunion was emotional, with tears and embraces all around. "Look at you," Arthur's mother kept saying, touching his face as if to make sure he was real. "You have done so well for yourself." Arthur introduced his family with pride, watching his parents marvel over their grandchildren. He showed them photographs of the house he had built and the store he and Theresa ran. He told them the whole story of how they met and what he had built from nothing. His father pulled him aside that evening. "I am proud of you, son. When the farm failed, I felt like I had failed you. Like I had let you down and left you with nothing. You gave me everything that mattered, Pa," Arthur said. "You taught me the value of hard work and honesty. You showed me how to treat people with respect. Those lessons were worth more than any property or money." "You have built a good life," his father said. "Better than what we lost. You did that yourself, and that is something no one can take from you." The visit lasted 2 weeks, and when it was time to leave, Arthur felt a sense of peace he had not known he needed. He had closed a circle, proving to himself and his parents that the hard years of drifting had not been wasted. They had been preparation for what came after. Back in Hot Springs, life continued its steady rhythm. Samuel graduated from high school and went off to study at the University of Nebraska, where he excelled in business courses. Elizabeth became increasingly involved in the store's visual presentation, designing displays that drew customers and increased sales. James followed his father around constantly, learning everything he could about building and construction. In 1905, Arthur made a decision that surprised many people. He announced that he was going to build a school in Hot Springs, a proper facility to replace the aging structure that had served the town for decades. He would donate his time and materials, asking only that the community help with labor. "Why would you do that?" Martha Reynolds asked when she heard. "You have already done so much for this town." "Because this town gave me a chance when I needed one," Arthur replied, "and because our children deserve the best education we can provide. A good school building is an investment in the future." The community rallied behind the project, and the new school was completed in time for the fall term of 1906. It was a beautiful building with large windows, modern facilities, and a design that would serve the town for generations. At the dedication ceremony, Arthur was asked to speak, but he kept his remarks brief. "I was once a man with nothing," he said to the assembled crowd. "No money, no prospects, no home. But this town did not judge me on what I did not have. It gave me the chance to prove what I could do. This school is my way of saying thank you and ensuring that future generations have the opportunities I was given." The applause was thunderous, and more than a few people were wiping tears from their eyes. Arthur had become more than just a successful businessman. He had become a symbol of what was possible with hard work, determination, and a community willing to give people a chance. As Arthur and Theresa moved into their 50s, they began to step back from the day-to-day operations of the store, trusting their employees and eventually their children to manage things. Samuel returned from college and took over much of the business management. Elizabeth married a kind young man who worked in the store and continued her role in merchandising. James was developing into a skilled builder, working alongside his father on construction projects. The house that Arthur built continued to stand as a testament to what he had accomplished. It had weathered more than 20 years of hard use and still looked solid and well-maintained. Arthur made sure to keep it in perfect condition, repairing anything that showed wear and continually improving small details. In 1910, Arthur and Theresa became grandparents for the first time when Elizabeth gave birth to a daughter. Holding his granddaughter, Arthur felt the same sense of wonder he had experienced with his own children, but now with the added perspective of age and experience. "This is what it is all about," he told Theresa that evening. "Building something that lasts beyond ourselves. This house, the business, our family, it will all continue after we are gone." "You have built well," Theresa said, taking his hand, "in every possible way." As they entered their 60s, Arthur and Theresa enjoyed the fruits of their labor. They traveled some, though Arthur always preferred being home. They spent time with their growing collection of grandchildren, passing on stories and lessons. They continued to be active in the community, supporting causes they believed in and helping those who needed it. The store remained successful under Samuel's management, adapting to changing times while maintaining the quality and service that had built its reputation. The house Arthur built sheltered 3 generations now, with family gatherings filling it with life and laughter. One evening in 1915, as Arthur and Theresa sat on their porch watching yet another sunset, Arthur reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 32 years since he had walked into that general store with nothing but $23 and determination. "You know what I think about most," Arthur said. "That moment when you offered me work. You had no reason to trust me. I was just another broke drifter passing through. But you saw something, or chose to believe something, and that changed everything." "I saw a man who was honest," Theresa said. "A man who was not making excuses or blaming others for his circumstances. A man who just wanted a chance to prove himself. And you gave me that chance," Arthur said. "Everything I became, everything we built, started with that one moment of faith." "No," Theresa corrected gently. "It started with your decision to walk into that store instead of riding past. It started with your choice to stay instead of drifting on. It started with your willingness to work hard and prove yourself. I just provided the opportunity, you did the rest." "We did it together," Arthur insisted. "Every step of the way we were partners. That is what made it work." "Yes," Theresa agreed, smiling. "We were partners. We are partners. We will always be partners." Arthur pulled her close, and they sat together as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The house he had built stood solid behind them, filled with memories and family. The life they had created together spread out around them: children and grandchildren, business and community, love and purpose. It had all started with a broke drifter and a woman willing to give him a chance. It had grown into something neither of them could have imagined that day in 1883. And it would continue, Arthur knew, long after they were gone, because they had built something that would last, not just a house or a business, but a legacy of hard work, integrity, and love. In 1918, Arthur and Theresa celebrated their 34th wedding anniversary. They were now 60 and 58, still healthy and active, still deeply in love. Their children were all successful in their own rights, and they had 7 grandchildren with more on the way. The house had been expanded and modified over the years to accommodate family gatherings, but its essential structure remained unchanged. The walls Arthur had raised with his own hands still stood straight and true. The foundation he had laid still held firm. It was, in every sense, built to last. On their anniversary, Arthur surprised Theresa by taking her back to the land where the house stood, to the exact spot where he had stood 35 years earlier with nothing but a dream and determination. "I stood right here," he said, "and I imagined what could be. I saw a house in my mind, a home where we could raise a family and build a life, but what I imagined was nothing compared to what we actually created." "You built your dream," Theresa said. "We built our dream," Arthur corrected, "and it was better than anything I could have imagined alone." They walked through the house together, room by room, remembering. The main room where they had held their wedding reception. The bedroom where their children were conceived and where grandchildren now sometimes stayed over. The kitchen where Theresa had cooked thousands of meals. The porch where they had spent countless evenings talking and planning and simply being together. "This house holds our whole life," Theresa said. "Every happiness, every challenge, every moment that mattered." "It is more than just wood and nails," Arthur agreed. "It is the physical representation of everything we promised each other. I said I would build you a house and a life, and I meant it. But what I did not understand then was that the house was the easy part. The life we built together that took both of us, every day, choosing each other and choosing to work toward the same goals." They ended up in the main room, where afternoon light streamed through the windows Arthur had installed so many years ago. Theresa took both of Arthur's hands in hers. "You proved them all wrong," she said. "Everyone who said you were just a broke drifter with nothing to offer. You proved that a man is not defined by what he has, but by what he is willing to build." "I had to prove it to myself most of all," Arthur admitted. "When I arrived in Hot Springs, I was beginning to believe what people said about me, that I was worthless, that I would never amount to anything. You changed that. You gave me a reason to prove otherwise." "And you did," Theresa said. "You built a house. You built a business. You built a family and a legacy. You built a life worth living. We built it," Arthur said firmly, "together, every part of it." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room, Arthur and Theresa stood together in the house he had built, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had created. Through the windows, they could see their grandchildren playing in the yard, the garden that had grown from nothing, the barn and outbuildings that made this a true homestead. It was not just a house. It was a testament to what was possible when someone was willing to work hard, to be honest, and to build something real. It was proof that circumstances did not define a person, that a broke drifter could become a successful businessman and community leader. It was a promise kept and a dream realized. But most of all, it was home. The place where Arthur and Theresa had built their life together, raised their family, and created memories that would last long after the boards and nails had turned to dust. It was the physical manifestation of their love story, built one piece at a time with care and dedication, and an absolute commitment to each other. Arthur pulled Theresa close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, just as she had done so many times over the years. They stood together in comfortable silence, two people who had started with almost nothing and built everything that mattered. The house stood solid around them, shelter and symbol, protection and promise. "I love you," Arthur said quietly. "I love you too," Theresa replied. "Thank you for building this life with me." "Thank you for giving me the chance to build it," Arthur said. Outside, their grandchildren called to them, wanting to show them something in the garden. Arthur and Theresa smiled at each other and went to see, hand in hand, walking through the house that had sheltered their dreams and their family for more than 3 decades. Behind them, the afternoon light continued to pour through the windows, illuminating the care and craftsmanship that had gone into every detail. The broke drifter had built a house. But more than that, he had built a life, a family, and a legacy that would endure for generations. He had proven that a man was not measured by where he started, but by what he built along the way. And what Arthur Fletcher had built, with Theresa by his side every step of the journey, was something truly worth having: a love that lasted, a home that sheltered, and a life well lived. Years continued to pass in gentle succession. Arthur and Theresa grew older together, watching their children become pillars of the community in their own right. Samuel expanded the store into a small chain, opening locations in neighboring towns. Elizabeth's artistic talents led her to teach art to young people throughout the region. James became known as one of the finest builders in South Dakota, carrying on his father's tradition of craftsmanship and integrity. By 1925, Arthur was 67 and Theresa 65. They had slowed down considerably, but their minds remained sharp and their love for each other as strong as ever. The house required less maintenance now that Arthur had finally accepted he could not do all the physical work himself. James handled most repairs and improvements, though Arthur still insisted on supervising and offering advice. On a warm summer evening, the entire family gathered at the house for a celebration. It was the 41st anniversary of Arthur and Theresa's wedding, and their children had organized a surprise party. The house was filled with children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The rooms Arthur had built rang with laughter and conversation, exactly as he had always hoped they would. After dinner, Samuel stood to make a toast. "I want to talk about what my father taught me," he began. "Not the business lessons, though there were plenty of those, but the real lessons about character, about integrity, about what it means to build something lasting." He gestured around the room. "This house has stood for 41 years because Dad built it right, not just adequately, but perfectly. Every joint is tight, every board is set true, every detail is considered. That is how he approaches everything, with care and precision and a commitment to doing things properly." Samuel's voice grew emotional. "But more than that, he taught me that success is not about what you start with, but what you do with what you have. Dad arrived in Hot Springs with basically nothing, but he had something more valuable than money. He had the willingness to work, to learn, to build. And he had the wisdom to recognize opportunity when Mom offered it." Theresa squeezed Arthur's hand as their son continued. "What they built together is more than this house or the store or the wealth they accumulated. They built a family. They built a reputation. They built a legacy of treating people fairly and contributing to the community. That is what I hope to pass on to my children: not just material success, but the values that make success meaningful." There was not a dry eye in the room as Samuel raised his glass. "To Mom and Dad, thank you for showing us what love looks like, what partnership means, and what it takes to build a life worth living." The toast was echoed around the room, and Arthur found himself overwhelmed with emotion. This was what mattered. Not the house or the business or any material thing, but the family they had raised and the values they had passed on. Later, after most of the guests had left, and only the immediate family remained, Arthur and Theresa sat on their porch, watching the stars. Their children and grandchildren were scattered throughout the house, some sleeping, others talking quietly. "This is what I dreamed of," Arthur said. "Not consciously, maybe, but somewhere deep down. A house full of family, a life full of love, purpose and meaning beyond just survival." "You made it happen," Theresa said. "You took nothing and turned it into everything." "We made it happen," Arthur corrected, as he always did. "I could never have done any of this without you. You were the foundation that everything else was built on." "We were each other's foundation," Theresa said. "That is what made it work." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of crickets and distant coyotes. This land that had been bare and empty when Arthur first stood on, it was now tamed and productive, supporting not just their family but contributing to the community around them. "You have any regrets?" Theresa asked suddenly. Arthur considered the question carefully. "Not about anything that matters. Sure, there were hard times, times when money was tight or things did not go as planned, but those struggles made the success sweeter. They taught us what we were capable of. So no real regrets." "Me either," Theresa said. "I chose well when I hired that broke drifter," Arthur laughed. "And I chose well when I walked into your store instead of riding on by." "Do you think you would have?" Theresa asked. "Ridden past, I mean, if your horse had not needed water." "Honestly, I do not know," Arthur admitted. "I might have. I was so focused on getting somewhere else, convinced that opportunity was always just ahead. But fate or luck or divine intervention, whatever you want to call it, brought me to your door. And I was smart enough to recognize the opportunity when you offered it." "I saw something in you," Theresa said. "Even then, covered in trail dust and broke as could be, there was something in your eyes, determination, pride, the refusal to give up even when everything had gone wrong. That is what made me offer you the job. Best decision you ever made." Arthur asked, teasing. "Best decision I ever made," Theresa confirmed without hesitation. In 1928, Arthur's health began to decline. He had lived a hard life before settling in Hot Springs, and those years of deprivation had taken their toll. He developed a persistent cough that Doc Harrison's successor could not quite cure. Arthur bore it with his usual quiet determination, not complaining, just adapting. Theresa worried constantly, hovering over him in a way that would have annoyed him if he had not recognized it as love. Their children visited more frequently, making sure someone was always nearby to help if needed. "I am not an invalid," Arthur protested one day when James tried to help him up the porch steps. "I know, Dad," James said patiently, "but humor me anyway." On a crisp October day in 1928, Arthur asked Theresa to walk through the house with him. She took his arm, and they moved slowly from room to room. Arthur paused in each space, remembering. "I built this room when Samuel was born," he said, in the nursery. "I wanted him to have his own space, somewhere that was just his." In Elizabeth's old room, he touched the window frame. "I carved these flowers for her. She was maybe 8 years old and said she wanted flowers that would bloom all year." In the main room, he stood for a long time, looking around. "This was the first space I completed. I stood right here and thought about how we would fill it with life and love, and we did. We really did." Theresa was crying openly now, understanding what this tour meant. Arthur was saying goodbye. "Do not cry," he said gently. "This is not sad. Look what we built together. Look at what we created. That is not something to cry about." "I am not ready to lose you," Theresa said. "You are not losing me," Arthur replied. "I will always be here. In every board I placed, in every room we shared, in the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I built this house to last, and it will stand long after I am gone. When you look at it, you can remember what we built together." "I love you so much," Theresa said, holding him tightly. "I love you too," Arthur said. "You gave me everything. A purpose, a home, a family, a life worth living. That broke drifter who walked into your store never imagined he could have all this. But you believed in him, and that belief made everything possible." Arthur Fletcher passed away quietly in his sleep 2 weeks later, with Theresa by his side in the house he had built. He was 69 years old. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives he had touched through his work, his kindness, his integrity, and his example. At the service, Samuel spoke again about his father. Arthur Fletcher arrived in Hot Springs with $23 and a dream. He left a legacy that will endure for generations. Not just in the buildings he constructed or the business he helped build, but in the lives he touched and the example he set. He proved that a man is not defined by his circumstances, but by his character and his willingness to work for something better. Theresa lived another 12 years, surrounded by her family in the house Arthur had built. She ran her fingers over the walls he had raised and walked floors he had laid. She felt his presence in every corner of the home they had shared. It was a comfort, knowing he was still with her in the place he had created for them. She passed away peacefully in 1940 at the age of 78, in the bedroom she had shared with Arthur for 41 years. The house went to James, who maintained it lovingly, making sure it remained true to his father's original vision while adapting it for his own growing family. The store continued to thrive for many years, a monument to Arthur and Theresa's partnership and business acumen. The school Arthur built served the community for decades. The other buildings he constructed throughout the region stood as testaments to his skill and dedication, but his greatest legacy was the house. It stood for over a century, sheltering multiple generations of Fletchers. Each new inhabitant heard the story of the broke drifter who built it with his own hands to prove he was worthy of the woman he loved. Children grew up knowing how their great-great-grandfather had arrived with nothing and built everything. The house became something of a local landmark, preserved by the family and eventually listed on historical registers. People would drive by and pointed out the house that Arthur Fletcher built, the one that proved a man could overcome any circumstance with hard work and determination. The story of Arthur and Theresa became a legend in Hot Springs, passed down through generations. It was told to young people as an example of what was possible, to couples as a model of true partnership, to anyone who felt defeated by circumstances as proof that things could change. Because Arthur Fletcher had proven it could be done. He had shown that it did not matter where you started, only where you were determined to go. He had demonstrated that love and partnership could build something stronger than any physical structure. He had left a legacy not just of buildings and businesses, but of values and possibilities. The house stood through decades of storms and seasons, through changing times and evolving communities. It weathered everything because Arthur had built it right, with care and precision, and a commitment to making something that would last. Just as he had built his life carefully, precisely, with absolute commitment to doing things properly. And in that house, in every room and every corner, the love story continued to resonate. The broke drifter and the woman who gave him a chance. The partnership that built a business and a family. The promise kept and the dream realized. The house and the life built to prove that circumstance did not define destiny. It was a story of hope, of hard work, of love that overcame doubt and built something beautiful and lasting. It was the story of Arthur Fletcher, who walked into a general store with nothing and walked out with everything, who built a house to prove his worth, and in doing so built a legacy that would inspire generations. The house still stands, a testament to what one man could build with determination, skill, and the love of a good woman who believed in him. It is a reminder that we are not defined by where we start, but by what we choose to build along the way. And it is proof that sometimes the greatest fortunes are found not in gold or silver, but in the simple act of stopping when you could have ridden past, in taking the chance offered, in building something real and lasting with your own 2 hands and a heart full of hope. That is the legacy of Arthur Fletcher. That is the story of the house he built and the life he created. And it will endure as long as the boards hold and the walls stand, as a monument to what love and determination and honest work can achieve. A broke drifter became a builder, a father, a pillar of his community. And it all started with one woman's willingness to give him a chance and his determination to prove himself worthy of that faith. The house stands as evidence. The family continues as proof. The story endures as inspiration. Arthur Fletcher built it all from nothing, with Theresa by his side every step of the way. And what they built together, the house, the life, the love, proved to be stronger and more lasting than any doubt or difficulty could overcome. That is the power of building something real. That is the promise of hard work and honest love. That is the legacy of Arthur and Theresa Fletcher, preserved in wood and stone, in memory and story, in a house built to last and a life well lived. And it will stand, as Arthur intended, for as long as there are people who believe that circumstances can be overcome, that love can build what seems impossible, and that sometimes the greatest fortunes are found not in what we discover, but in what we have the courage and determination to build ourselves.